efficiency, that's what we're looking for. You have an extra.
Did you see this? Looks like the budget number we could use is 64,000.
Yep.
50,000.
Yep, I wasn't sure what the number was at. I just talked to Dr. Donnie this morning. It's all up, but
To amend that and take the extra 14 grand.
And Jody, do you want these handed out to other members?
if anybody wants it, yeah. Director Grenier is probably what I'm thinking. And I don't know. I don't think I emailed it to Donnie.
Is it running?
It is running.
It's running right now.
It was 64. 64. This is what happened to mine when I took it out of the end of
64,173.
All right. All right, welcome to the Finance Committee. This is Tuesday, December 13th. And Alderman Tom Duane, Alderman Tom Slotnick, Alderman Mark Stoyer, myself, Alderman Joe Moore present. Can I get a motion for the approval of the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take 6 and 7 together as one.
Pull it from. Yeah, you're right, sorry. Yeah, I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion to amend the agenda combining items 6 and 7. With that amendment, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And none are opposed. Thank you. Item number 3 is the approval of the minutes of the Finance Committee from November 22nd.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And none opposed. Item number 4, report of the purchasing manager. We'll take these all together here. Letter A, consideration of possible action, the request for approval to award the purchase of 2 ambulances to Jefferson Fire and Safety, Inc. for $472,024. Letter B, consideration of possible action, the request for a change in contractors for EMS billing services. All right, Zach.
We went out for quotes on 2 ambulances for this year to be delivered in 2017. We received 2 quotes, and we're recommending an award to the low bidder, Jefferson Fire and Safety Incorporated. Combined cost for 2 ambulances, $438,786.
$110,000 less than the other bid.
That was $438,786, correct? You said cents.
I'm sorry. Yes.
I figured it was that.
Take that.
Small mistake.
So what's the 472,024 number?
That includes this stuff at the bottom.
Oh, the grill guards, power pots, TransSafe kits. Okay. All right.
Huh?
Do we have a motion on
Move
that?
approval.
I will second.
Motion and approval.
Well, this is a report you just received and placed on file because it's done already, right?
No, it's not.
Okay,
No,
then
this is a
I'll
request
second
to
the-
approve.
Okay.
Okay.
We have a motion and second to approve the purchase of the 2 ambulances from Jefferson Fire and Safety. All in favor?
Aye.
And none are
Yeah,
opposed.
still table cost for that.
And item B. This is the changing contractors for EMS billing.
In 2015, we awarded a contract for the EMS billing services for ambulance billing, charging back patients for ambulance services, etc. That contract was awarded to Intramedics. We have, and Chief can attest to this, I think there was a letter from the Chief included in your packet, significant problems, underperformance by the existing contractor, no attempt to work with the city to improve the situation, and we have notified that contractor. We've sent them a certified letter of our intent to terminate the contract. We gave them 6 months' notice as required in the contract, and at this point we're asking for approval to award the contract to the second highest score. As you may recall, we had 10 bidders in response to the RFP in 2017. Intermedics and LifeQuest were very neck and neck in terms of number 1 and number 2. and we believe that LifeQuest has all of the qualifications. They're a Wisconsin-based provider, and are requesting permission to award the balance of that contract to LifeQuest.
So we were only with them for 8 months before we realized all the problems that we had, and
We
and
made the
decided to-
award in August and started the contract in
October.
October
Right.
of 2015.
Right, and then we gave 6 months' notice, which would bring us into April.
No, the 6 months notice started when the letter of intent was, which was last month. So they have until May 15th.
Oh, okay, so it's
Yes.
extended through that time? Okay,
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Alderman Dwayne?
Yeah, Chief, obviously you were part of picking this group, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's,
When we did the proposal, I'll just rewind this for you real quick. We had a company out of Milwaukee that we were using before. They were charging us 6.5% on the billing. We had a lot of technical issues with them back then, on top of the fact that we didn't own the software for patient care reporting, yada, yada. Went out to bid, we picked Intermedics. Intermedics bid 4.34% on their collection fee. They made a lot of promises, including training our medics on writing narratives, on making sure that we wrote them in such a way that we didn't get any rejections for not medically necessary for Medicare, training on collecting signatures, and a whole bunch of other promises. They promised to collect additional revenue for us because they had a fancy formula and metrics. We did check out all their references at the time. There was 10 plus at that time. We checked out both Intermedics and the second company that we're talking about today, LifeQuest. Essentially, every single promise that they made to us, they have not fulfilled one single promise, despite repeated efforts on not only my part, but a lot of our staff's time trying to get them to comply. LifeQuest bid at the time 4.5%, so 0.16% higher. That 0.16% comes out on $2.6 million of revenue, about $4,130. We've spent probably 5 times that amount in staff time trying to get them to do what they promised to do. So we're recommending the change.
Is there any cost to the termination of contract? It was just the notice that had to be given?
No, that's why we gave them the 6 months notice. If we had given them 30 days, which was allowed for cause, we would have been subject to proving cause, and that could have turned into litigation. So on the advice of the city attorney, we gave them 6 months notice.
Any other discussion?
Move approval.
I have a motion to approve and a second. Switch the contract. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And none are opposed. Great. Thank you. Item number 5. Actually, let me grab the one here. Item number 5 is consideration with possible action on the results from. Yes, I'm sorry, yes, Your Honor.
Is there any way we could go next with the presentation?
It is
isn't that what we're doing now?
that is right now. That is
Yep.
the one you're on.
This is the Bray Architect.
Great.
Yep. Consideration with possible action on the results from Bray Architects spatial needs assessment for a public safety building. And we will turn this over. If you could just,
Motion to open the floor?
sure. Got a motion to open the floor?
Second.
And a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Maybe if I could just
Yes.
start before the architect gets up here. As you know, back in March, and we set one of our long-term goals here is to really look at the design and possibly the new construction of a police facility. That building, and I know that you've all been through there numerous times, we've outgrown it. And then when we look at what the needs are going to be in the future for the city of Green Bay for the next 50 years, we look at the talent pool, and like the Packers have done and some businesses have done, I think facilities are part of a recruiting tool. It's not everything, but it's part of it. And we look at having something that's a state-of-the-art facility that we could use. And there's been a task force, and I don't know if one of you serve on there, but there's been meeting on a regular basis, just talking about, what do we need? And it's not really so much where it is yet, although we do have some options on property here in the city, as you well know. And we're all kind of pretty committed about being in the downtown area, and we've looked at some property, but that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. We want to update the finance committee, and then on Tuesday, the city council as to where we're at with this project. Some of the study groups that you formed, some of the discussions we've had, obviously with police in some deal, within a lot of detail with the police and what their needs will be over the next 30, 40 years. We've also talked with bringing in the corporate offices for the fire department. There's been some discussion with the municipal judge, and I know that he's been into a few meetings. And what's this going to look like? If we can just, this is no vote, this is just strictly an education, because this has been going on for, only been on board with us, what, 9 months?
Yeah, a little less than that.
A little less, but maybe 8 months that he's been working with our team and up here quite often. And I think we can just know in our mind that this will be happening in the next few years. And I will, if this city council takes some, that they like what they see, then I'm going to start working the political channels in Madison and in Washington, D.C. I mean, they have a responsibility to fund this too, and there's some education funding, and there's a lot of things that we can do. But this is just an update onto where we're at since we allocated the funds for this project. And the funds for this project did come out of some money that was in the budget, in the police budget for facilities.
Yes.
200, what did we pay you? 210?
Yeah, I don't
Okay,
have
it
that
was
on
about
there.
$200,000, and it's just an update today to the finance committee and then to the city council on Tuesday, so that it's something that we talked about 8 months ago and said we'd have a report by the end of the year, and here we are with the report.
Like 20,000 or something, right?
Oh, it's 20,000.
Yeah,
You know, 20.
We could renegotiate.
No, we're good. You didn't get the full 200 yourself, right? Great. If you could just say, your name and company you're with.
Sounds great. Yeah, my name is Michael Hacker, and I'm with Bray Architects. Matt Wolfert also is a part of the project. Matt's a owner with Bray. He wasn't able to be here tonight, but he's been integrated throughout the process to date. So, and thank you, Mayor, for the introduction. And so we've been working closely on basically a bi-weekly basis with the steering committee, starting to get our heads around your existing facilities and your existing needs as you have them in the PD, the fire, and then at the municipal court building. And what we're here tonight to present to you is basically a summary of the need and some preliminary thoughts and recommendations around potential solutions. As noted, not really here tonight to show you what a solution would look like. No architecture there yet, but to start to talk about what maybe some consolidated building square footage might look like, and talk a little bit about some of the cost relative to that. So we'll move through. I'll move through fairly quickly. Feel free to interject if you have questions as we go through it. So as noted from a study process, we've been working on a bi-weekly basis with the steering committee, generally meeting in person, but at times doing conference calls and screen shares. And you can see the representatives of the mayor's office, the police department, fire department, and then the municipal court as well. From there, then, we conducted existing building tours. We actually walked through each of the facilities, made sure we had a handle on how the department functions, how they interact with the public. Even though we've had extensive experience as a firm designing police stations and fire stations, municipal courts, everyone functions a little different from one another. And unique here in Green Bay, just at terms of the scale of this department and then its relationship with the county, it differs from many of the other facilities in the region. So I attempted the best we could to become kind of an extension of the expertise on that team relative to the existing building that they're in. Note, though, that really our study was focused on square footage of need. We really didn't do an analysis of the existing infrastructure of those buildings. Okay, so we were hired basically to be building looking forward here. So to do that, interviewed staff, did some surveying. So we had a digital survey that went out and spent some time talking with different department heads. We took a look at their existing space in order to start to project forward in terms of square footage need in the future. So it's tough to say how many square feet of X do you need without understanding how many square feet of that you have today. Okay, and talking about if it functions, if it doesn't, and how we can improve on that. We talked about future projections, and this is one we can certainly come back to tonight and talk more about if you'd like, but what we tried to charge the steering committee to do is help us project forward from a staffing perspective, from an operational perspective, into the future. And as we all know, that's really dependent on budgets and budget cycles and staffing that has been approved, or kind of emerging services that are on the horizon. And some of that is forecastable. Some of it we do our best to plan around and make sure we have square footage for that growth, but do our best not to overbuild, if that makes sense. And like I said, we can talk more about that, but to land on that, as a group, we felt most comfortable working with the steering committee in a 15-year vision. Okay. Key difference there is this is not the building, the bricks and mortar, the infrastructure certainly will last well beyond 15 years. But when we're talking how many staff in a department or a sub-department, how many vehicles might we have in a fleet, we're targeting that 15-year forecast. If we get much further, it gets pretty difficult for staff to really have a handle on what the department will look like 20 or 25 or 30 years from now. Okay, so like I said, we can spend some more time on that tonight if you'd like. We did some inventories of equipment. We spent some time talking about key adjacencies in terms of workflow and how we're interacting with the public. Talked about it in terms of safety and security. And then talked about kind of our public service and specifically how we're interacting with the public. We're doing the best we can today with the space we have, but there are some best practices. There's some emerging trends in the industry that I think would be applied to a new building here as well. Okay. So from there, like I said, we spent some time in each of the buildings focused on the operations. So first with the police department. Just for some context, that building is about 50 years old. Okay, so the original building, the building they're in today, was built in 1968. It did have renovations in 92, but again, really didn't add square footage on. It just renovated the square footage that was there. And that building today, as it sits, is about 55,000 square feet in total gross square footage. Okay, and tonight, just as a point of reference, we're going to talk about net square footage and gross square footage. Okay, and net square footage is really the inside dimensions of any one room. Okay, so wall to wall. And that's really, as you add up all the rooms that you need in net, that gets us to a total program square footage, but that doesn't take into account hallways or elevators or mechanical rooms, things that we know we're going to need if we build a new building. So then we'll talk about gross square footages relative to that. So as you compare, today we have about a 55,000 square foot gross existing PD. It's on about a 2-acre site. There's about 140 parking stalls, depending on how you count them. It's right in that range. Those parking stalls are a blend of public, private, they're squad vehicles. It's a little bit of everything that's in and around that site. And we are on the, as you know, the adjacent kind of shared site with the municipal court. So a couple observations that we had moving through the building. You know, the building lacks a bit of civic presence. Just from a first-time observer walking through, walking down the street or driving past, that building doesn't stand out necessarily as kind of a key civic building as it may want to within a community of this size. It really doesn't have a lot of site control. Again, as you look at that parking lot, there's really not a lot of control in terms of where the public is and where the staff vehicles are. The public has access to garage doors and open garage doors, and so it was just a clear challenge or set of challenges there. A very limited community or public space in that building. That would be kind of a very rapidly growing trend in any municipal design that we do is finding opportunities to create public space in that building, space that maybe is accessible by more than just our staff, more than just our teams that are training or whatever it may be, but maybe open and available for the public to use as well. Okay. Quite a few inefficiencies just in the staffing, and again, that's how the staff moves on the private side over the course of the day. And again, that's basically a 2-story plus a basement, so basically a 3-story building. So we do have staff moving up and down amidst all 3 of those stories just in the natural flow. We have sub-departments that are split on multiple floors. Very common as you evolve in a building, you just do your best with what you have, and they're doing a great job with what they have, but it's very clear as you start to look at storage and evidence processing that's really divided up amidst multiple spaces inside that building, that there are kind of a number of inefficiencies just in how that team moves. And then certainly inadequate space for police services, you know, to identify some of those investigations. Computer forensics is a rapidly growing department. Professional standards and training, a critical piece of what they do. Obviously here we have a unique component with our game day dispatch, but also just kind of our major event, our key event dispatch. We have kind of a headquarter moment inside of that building. That's quite undersized for the scale that that's functioning at. And then not noted here, really the garage is in vehicle storage, vehicle maintenance bays is significantly inadequate compared to what we're projecting the need to be. Okay, and again, we'll talk more about that in square footage in a bit here. So then we did the same exercise at the fire station. So Fire Station 1 obviously was a functioning fire station at one point in time. This building dates back to 1929. Did have some renovations in the early 80s. Is only about 5,000 square feet at 2 stories, but as we know, the first floor, the majority of that is apparatus bay storage. Okay, so the majority of the office space and you know, staff space is really located on the second level there. A much smaller site. We have about 1/3 of an acre, really only a handful of parking stalls on site, but that's really that main apron. This is a triangular site right now. You know, it has kind of an urban characteristics just in terms of building being right up to the street edge, a lot of pedestrian movement, although we have kind of one-way streets moving on either side of it, and is kind of a challenging site to maneuver apparatus on and off of relative to kind of some of those characteristics. And then similarly, in terms of observations here, I think the reality that this building does have some historic character to it. That's a bit subjective, so we'll leave that up to the group to determine what that means, but it does look and feel like a fire station, historic fire station. It does lack an intuitive main entry, so if you're someone in the public approaching this building, there is not a very clear front door to this building. And even once you find that front door, once you get access into the building, there is no, you're entering into a stairwell. There is no reception, there's no, you're kind of dependent on signage in many ways. And or the inefficiency of staff needing to leave their stations to come greet you and then bring you up to where you're meeting. Okay. With that, we have this combination with the apparatus storage on the first level. So we have some backup equipment, a lot of equipment and just general storage that starts here before it's then brought out to the other stations. As I noted, staffing inefficiencies, lack of ADA compliance. Okay, this building really doesn't would not support a staff member in a wheelchair conveniently, okay, and would require with any renovation that to be updated. And then limited vehicle equipment and general maintenance space at that first floor. Municipal court, I think of the three, and we'll talk a bit more about this in a minute, has the most recent renovations, just back in 2000. And with those renovations, really are functioning within a building that's about 6,500 square feet total. First floor plus a basement, and I think it's important to note here that a fair amount of that basement square footage actually is PD used right now. That's where the fitness center is, if you're familiar with that. And so the majority of the municipal court functions really happen just on that first floor. Generally, the building functions quite well for their use. It is intuitive in terms of what the main entry is. You enter into a main lobby. There is a reception desk right at within that space. In talking with staff, the lobby is adequate in terms of its size. It does fill, there's no doubt, and they do have a little bit of spill, but it's managed well over the course of that limited window of time that it's at that capacity. Off of that main lobby, there are a couple conference rooms and meeting rooms that support some of the pretrial functions, and then the actual courtroom it functions quite well. There may be some small AV needs and just kind of general updates in that space, but from a square footage standpoint, it was identified that it functions really well for the space that it's in. And then as we step behind the secure line into the staff space, again, what we heard was the current space that we have functions really well, and as we forecast 15 years into the future, they're comfortable with that amount of square footage. Okay, so in a second here, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of recommendations, and you can see here really that building generally does function well in support of the current municipal services there. So before I dive into kind of a few of the summary slides and some of the recommendations, in terms of need, is there any initial questions that the committee has? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we're thinking about put municipal court there, because once the police department leaves with their, because obviously you're gonna have everything together, they're gonna have more than adequate space. So
Yep.
put that kind of money for something that's already functioning well.
Yep.
Because I can't imagine keeping a fitness thing down there when we build this new police department,
Yeah.
without.
And let me speak to that just a little bit. So how we always approach this and how we've worked with the staff is really thinking of this as 3 almost independent studies. So we're studying PD as a standalone need, fire as a standalone, municipal court as a standalone. And then in our executive summaries, we start to look at solutions. We start to consider where might there be opportunities to blend these together in a solution. Okay, and I think what you'll see here is that we really did not see many square footage efficiencies. We didn't see many current needs with the municipal court. Okay, and even as we started to look at, okay, what if we did move municipal court in with a new PD or a renovated PD, whatever that may be, there really was not much staffing efficiency gained. We didn't find many efficiencies in terms of lobbies, because really they need to function separately in terms of how those lobbies work. There wasn't a lot of conference room needs that could overlap. So the reality is, even if we built new, again, there wasn't a lot of gained efficiency in blending them together. And their building, compounding that, it functions quite well for their current services. So.
If I could just say, I think we did want to question, why didn't you study the municipal judge? And Jerry was in here, but I think you're right. They're pretty happy and they're pretty efficient the way they are, but
Right.
we just included it in this needs assessment study.
That's fine. I was just wondering.
Yep.
Thank you.
And so to build on that, what we worked on was a room-by-room square footage analysis for each of the entities. So like first municipal court, PD, fire, and then we'll talk more about this storage here in a second. And then ultimately landed on total square footages, again, independent of one another. So what you see on the screen here is a summary of the net square footage need, or the program square footage need for each of those entities. Okay, and so you can see municipal court is about 4,600 square feet of need. The police department, about 81,000 square feet. The fire department, 17,500, and then we saw a just raw storage, archival storage need for both the fire and the PD. And when we looked at that as kind of a standalone thing, that we identified at about 16,900 square feet in total. Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
Are you talking here about storage for vehicles or storage for documents?
The latter. Yeah, documents, evidence, long-term storage that doesn't have immediate need. It was somewhat purposeful that we identified that separately, because that's, I think, and I'll allow PD to speak more in detail to this tonight if you'd like, but that's a need we know is on the immediate horizon. Even if nothing else happens, just that raw need is out there. So we identified that separately because we may need to understand that as a separate project.
Can't just store it in the cloud?
Store it in the cloud would be nice. Get all that evidence in the cloud. There is some, in regards to evidence for PD, there are statutes within the state that homicide investigations, anything at over a certain caliber, is a forever keep. And that's something you have to house and maintain. Some of it has to be refrigerated. And as you can imagine, in a community of this size, that starts to add up quickly, just in terms of square footage. And I think what we tried to do here is recognize that, that square footage doesn't have to be adjacent to or in the same building as the rest of PD. It may, depending on where the site lands for this, it may be more beneficial from a cost of site acquisition and/or there may be some benefits to just having it detached, locating that somewhere outside of the downtown. And so we can talk about it. Not trying to get ahead of ourselves, but just try to isolate that a bit separately.
Quick question. With this storage, you're looking 30 years down the road? Is that, so you're anticipating room,
Yep.
that there will be plenty of room to grow?
Yep, and and one of the benefits with the storage is there are ways in the future that you can increase through systems, storage systems, the overall capacity in that space. So we tried to understand it as just raw square footage, but even amidst that, you can start to put in high density storage and higher bay storage and do some different things to increase the quantity in there.
Did the police share anything as far as what percentage they're at right now with storage?
Yeah.
I don't know if
We did a,
Well,
Yes, I'm sorry,
if we
Captain.
could,
Captain Lokes, Police Department, we did a site analysis about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and they estimated that we had about 4.5 to 5 years of evidence storage left in our building before we would be maxed out. And that's, we're down to using our old maintenance office. Is the only building in the basement that had an outside fan. So that is now our drug storage. So now our animal officer and our maintenance guy share an office because we needed to take over his office to store our drugs. We're in 5 different evidence rooms throughout the building, so our efficiency is gone as far as we keep media property in one area for officers to put into. Guns are stored in a different area. Any long-term evidence now is stored in a separate area. The efficiency is not there, and in about 4 more years, 3.5 more years, we'll be maxed out. So we're going to have to do something regardless if the new building is passed or not. Federal and state laws require now, it used to be through adjudication. So once you're convicted guilty, we could get rid of your evidence. Now it's through the entire incarceration process. So if you're sentenced 25 years to life, we are holding on to that evidence for 25 years to life. And we just have no room for it.
Thank you.
yes, thank you.
So in the final study document, you'll see the detailed space programs, which basically add up to all the summary totals that you see here. But what we wanted to identify here was as a total need amidst all 3 of these departments and 4 of these areas is about 120,500 square feet of net programmatic space need. Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
When will the final study document be available to us?
Soon. So what we're trying to do with this is make sure we're packaging a full picture of the recommendation, which again we'll talk more about here at the end of this, but overlays potential site scenarios and things like that. So we're just not prepared yet to present that level of information. This in a draft form in the study document without that section is basically available once we're ready to release that.
Thank you.
Yep. So in terms of a recommendation at this point, I think it's important for us, as we had said, to understand where we are, start to help project forward in terms of need, but then start to look at what might a solution look like. And as we alluded to before, the first step in that is making a recommendation that the municipal court continue to function as they do out of their existing buildings, okay, or building singular. Noting there that obviously they have enough square footage within that building. I think the organization of that building functions quite well. There may be some general maintenance, some AB needs, some just aesthetic improvements that could be considered, but from a functional space standpoint, the building I think is adequate. And note that obviously if in fact the PD is built that includes a fitness center in it, that space in the basement would obviously come available for other purposes as well. Okay, so first step is identifying that we think municipal court can function in that building on that site quite well moving forward. And then the second piece of the recommendation is looking at a combined PD and fire admin facility. Okay, and so what we've done here is looked at the fact that both entities are significantly undersized in terms of their existing buildings compared to their need. We have some just general public safety components that come along with that. we see some efficiencies, one from a staff standpoint. Both entities have training functions. Both entities do some shared command and or post-event debriefing together. There may be some benefits there. We do have a separate EOC, but the site could certainly act as a backup or a subsidiary EOC, which is an Emergency Operations Center component. So there are some benefits to that. In addition to that, I think from a public standpoint, the public accessing the building, having a main lobby, within that main lobby, from one desk or two very close adjacent desks, be able to answer any question relative to public safety, whether it's police or fire. I think there's a lot of benefit from the public standpoint in that approach as well. Then, there's a reality that both entities basically have two very similar types of space. One would be office space and staff space. The other would be more raw garage space or vehicle storage space. Both entities have very similar needs. So from a building organization standpoint and efficiency of construction standpoint, we see some benefits there. Okay, and so as we looked at that, as I talked 2 slides ago, we did analysis of the total net square footage need. And now that we start to look at what a shared building looks like, we create a separate space program for that building. Okay, so we kind of blend those 2 programs. We identify where we have duplicative lobby space and some, duplicated public restroom space and things like that. So we iron that out. We identify those savings. Add on grossing factors. Okay, so we take that total net and we have grossing factors for circulation, which would be stairs and hallways and elevators. We have grossing factors for mechanical space, so just boiler rooms and kind of air handling space. And then lastly, just a miscellaneous grossing factor, which would be wall thicknesses and plumbing chases and things like that. So we add up those components onto it and we land at just under 135,000 square feet of gross building area. Okay, and in summary, that basically means that if we were to recognize all of the square footage need on one site, blending these together, we think that that building is going to be needs to be about 135,000 square feet in total.
Alderman Blaine?
Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, this building should have been built already. I mean, obviously, we just don't jump into it, but the police department's been needing this for a long time. But when I look at something and we're going to put this kind of money, I want to know that we're doing it right. And so when I look at this and combining them two, I know the fire department and the police department do different kind of trainings, and I would want to make sure they both have enough room that they can both train in this facility to its fullest, and you be able to use it. And another thing, you talk about the fitness. I would want to see that in the building. You already mentioned that, but I'm just wondering about a firing range. I mean, I don't know if you do that inside, but that's something I would like to see established into that building also.
It has been included, so there's a firing range.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that if we're going to do this, it's going to be top notch, that we really have the Taj Mahal to make sure the future is really secured, and if these guys come to work, they have everything that they need.
And we have, so when we talk training, we have both tactical training, which is like firing ranges. Yep, it's confined space training, things like that. But it's also classroom training and training that supports the everyday professional side as well. So we have accommodated both, we believe, and kind of recognize that in a blended building what that might look like, as well as the fitness center. And thanks for noting that. But yeah, that is included as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
I was going to ask, did you check other cities around the area, the state, maybe other Midwest communities, and just find out how many different cities have combined police, fire within their buildings, within a building, and what the efficiencies are?
Sure. So we did do a number of precedent analyses as part of this. There is not a direct comparable community in the state that really has the same number of remote fire stations, that does the same type of community policing that you do, that has the same relationship with the county that you do. And so, like I said earlier, I think every community is unique and kind of their solution is customized. But we did reference multiple entities, Bray projects as well as others, as we started to look at what a training room might look like, what a kind of shared conference spaces or public spaces may look like. We looked at Greenfield Police, which is police and municipal court. We looked at Mount Pleasant, which is a large a very rapidly growing village, but it has a PD and kind of community space as part of it, and so as well as a few others. So we did attempt to reference as closely as we can to some of those as we looked at specific spaces.
I mean, I know in our area we have Schwabenen that has all three
Yep.
within the area. So
Yep.
I'm just wondering who you checked.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And then outside of the building square footage, we know from a site perspective, we think we're going to need about 328 stalls total. Okay, and that's a big number, but I think it's important to note that that would include all staff, and PD staff is significant. It's right around 200 total people. We have the fire folks, and then we also have our public space as well, and some of our large gathering rooms to support that. Again, that we accounted for the reality not every patrol officer is on it at one time, so we looked at shift overlaps and did our best to project what we thought this total parking space would total would need to be. And then, as I noted in the earlier slide, that's 16,900 square foot net need of remote storage. When grossed up, would be about 21,000 square feet of total building need for kind of that annex storage facility. So now costs. So if we're ready, I'm sure the finance committee was waiting for this slide. So at this point, I think it's, as we look at where we're at in the process, we know a lot about the departments. We know a lot about the need. We know what we've included in the program, like a firing range and fitness space and things like that. But there are many, many more things we don't know yet. It's just too early in the process. Site impacts, what happens with utilities, specifics relative to some of the detailed rooms. We have certainly not advanced the design to that level. Okay, so yeah.
Sorry, does that include future technologies, making sure that the electrical components are correct, making sure that, even electric cars, things like that, down the road, that the building can be modified and adjusted to?
Yep.
Okay.
To the best we know today.
Right.
Yep. And so
right.
I think what we're going to show you here are kind of a cost model and a total cost range for this project, with some assumptions, many assumptions, but some key assumptions, and then some not included. So why don't I go through this, and then I can ask and try to answer specifics. Okay. So we always start with new construction. So again, about 135,000 square feet. New construction is about just under $25 million. Okay, and that's bricks and mortar construction. That's electrical. There are more numbers to come. Hang with me here. HVAC, plumbing, things like that. We then have fixed equipment in the building, so casework, countertops, transaction windows. Some of those have bulletproof glass associated with them and pass-throughs. So fixed equipment is about $175,000. We then have a fair amount of specialty equipment, and as you can imagine in both these space types, there's a fair amount of unique and very specialty components that get plugged into the square footage that is accounted for above. And that we think are estimating at this point, it's a little over $400,000 worth of specialty equipment. General construction, so the reality is that all the numbers in the first three categories are physical, bricks and mortar, secured to the building things. But then there's a reality that you are going to need to hire a contractor. There's going to be general conditions. There's going to be insurance and bonds that need to be woven into this. So we believe that we have about $2 million, $2.7 million of general construction related components. And then the last category is kind of the everything else category. And so in this place we have furniture, fixtures, and equipment. We assume that we would relocate whatever furniture possible into the new building, but you can see we're more than doubling the square footage, so there are a lot of space that we don't have today. So we know we're going to need new furniture in that building. The firing range was a great example. The bricks and mortar shell and the HVAC shell of that range are included in the numbers above. But when we get down here, the actually outfit of that, the berm and the tracks with the targets and all of that, that's a separate build-out number, and that's held within this latter category. We have contingency dollars, and that's again gives the owner some dollars during construction to protect for risks that arise. Soft costs, architectural fees, engineering fees, geotechnical borings, things like that. And then lastly, inflation. And this is always kind of our challenge this early in the process is how long into the future do we project building this building? Okay, and so for us, we've made some assumptions in terms of inflating what all the numbers above are today dollars. We need to be able to project that out into the future. And so that number becomes quite large. That's about $8 million, and there's a lot that goes into that number. But that in total, we believe is between $34 and $38 million for that project. Okay. A couple important assumptions. Let me run you through these, and then Alderman, I can answer your question. So we've assumed a spring of 18 construction commencement. Okay, basically bid this project spring of 18. That's not attempting to get out ahead of ourselves. We just have to pick a date in order to establish this budget around. And that's, in essence, we think the fastest we can move. Okay, so if we said go sometime in the first quarter of next year, by the time we complete engineering, acquire sites, do all that work, we wouldn't be able to really break ground in the winter. We'd recommend you avoid that. So we'd break ground spring of the following year. Construction duration, we think a project of this size would take about a year. And then at this point, we've assumed conventional footings and foundations. Again, that's kind of a caveat depending on the site we're on, but we have to start somewhere. And then a couple things that we just don't know yet, so it really wouldn't be fair to us apply those dollars or guesses on those dollars. Would be site acquisition. Okay, so again, to this point in the process, we've just talked preliminarily about site considerations, but we really have not selected any sites. And that relative to the impact on this, if it's a private site or something we need to acquire, those dollars would still need to be factored into this. Any existing improvements to that site have not obviously been assumed, so if there's any existing buildings that need to be demolished or poor soils that need to be remediated, none of that has been included. We also don't know yet the communication tower impact, if we're going to need to recreate that on a new site or not. Any moving temporary facility locations, and then some of the loose technology at this point has not been woven in to date. So what we think is at this point in the process, based on what we know, as I kind of led with as many big asterisks as we can add on, we do the best we can with what we know, but there are many, many things yet that we don't know. So this is what we think would at least establish the right expectation for a building of this size.
In the $8 million figure, that includes your inflation? What did you assume in that?
Yeah, it's about, we use this year's dollars, so we had to have 17 and then into 18, so it's basically 2 years, and we have about 4.5% inflation a year right now. Okay. But it's compounding, so it's 4.5 for the first year, and then you put 4.5 on top of that increase, so it's actually about a 9.2% increase on the dollar. So I think it's about $3 million of that 8, I think is just inflation.
And what is meant by loose technology?
That's a good question. So that would be things, so generally when we say what's included in the bricks and mortars, anything physically fixed to the building. So we would run data and power to a center ceiling mount, put the mount in, but from there loose technology would be you purchasing the projector and installing that projector. That would be a separate, generally we don't recommend you, if this is, let's just say this is a 20-year borrow, or that projector is not going to last those 20 years. You usually don't borrow those dollars for that projector, as an example. So we just isolate that separately, so we are thinking of that differently.
Thank you.
Yep.
Your Honor, several months ago, you pulled $40 million out of thin air. How did you get to that number? You're like right on it.
This is a state of the art, and I think I don't want to lose sight of what he said about the presence of police and fire in this city. I mean, we're a working city, and so the building is going to have a statement to it, and I think that's important. But you know, this is something that we need to talk about, and I think you're right. We've talked about it, and I think it's okay to bond for something like this. I think it's okay that our kids pay for this because it's going to be here. This is like a highway. This is infrastructure, and it's something that we need for recruiting. So I don't know where you want to go with this, if you want the whole presentation to the full council on the 20th, or if you have some questions, but I just don't want this on a shelf now. We spent the $20,000. He's worked hard. John's been awesome, and the chiefs as well. working on getting this. And I know your question probably is site, and I have some in mind, but that would have to be closed session, because once we get interested, if we don't own it, or if we own something close to it, the price goes up. So, however you guys want to proceed with this, I'm all in.
Put it on
Huh?
closed session for the council, and then we can talk about the site and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say it would be nice to have this information, this packet, you know, with our mail packet, you know, come out to us for review, and then if you're available, you know, to open the floor and have questions. I don't know that we have to go through page by page. If we all have that issued to us ahead of time, if that's a possibility.
Yes.
I think that would probably be the best way to handle it at council, and then
Right.
have that caveat with that option to go into closed session to discuss numbers further.
Or the site.
Or the site, right?
Yeah, put it on there.
I mean, and that's one of the things I was gonna ask was about the site, because downtown value, and we just talked about this the other night, the value of property downtown far exceeds even when you just get, you know, half a mile out of the downtown. So, you know, if you've got a property down here and you put on it, you're never gonna collect taxes on this property. But if you move it just out of the downtown, you know, your land's a little cheaper, and now you have property downtown that you can, you know, develop and have a more taxable income. I mean, I understand that it's not gonna be a huge difference, but, I mean, is it in your opinion, and then Mayor, I know that you want, you know, a high profile, pretty shiny building downtown, but how much is that a necessary thing if we have an opportunity to develop the site differently?
Like close to downtown, like you'd like it in your district? Is that what you're?
Well, the site I suggested, and I understand there's challenges with the site I suggested. I know that there's a lot of challenges. That's actually Alderman Scannell's district too, by the way. So, but I'm just saying, if it's just out of the downtown, I mean, I think that
We're going to show you three
Which still see
properties
value.
that we can get, we either own or we can get at a very good value. And
Okay.
if you want us to expand the scope for land, then
well, I would like to
that's
see
what-
those in the closed session.
You'll
then
see those
when-
three in the closed session.
I think I got
Yeah.
a couple by me.
You're too far out. It's got to stay closer. So
I think important with the site to keep in mind too, as you're thinking about it, is that parking impact, because that's a lot of stalls, and that as a surface lot is a lot of stalls, and that as a structure, or that, you know, if it was a parking structure, if there was a parking structure tied to some broader impacts, broader benefits to the community, there may be some ways to tie in some of that into this dialogue. Okay, so and I do have a site slide here in just a second.
Oh.
So maybe let me finish this piece, and then we can
Sure,
talk just a little more
I
about that.
thought we're done.
Oh, almost. One
I
more cost.
apologize.
No, one more cost. So then we wanted to at least break out the cost of what we think that annex building is going to be. Okay, it's not as much as the other one, but you can see the same structure applies. Assumptions very similar, less duration. So we think a building of this size could be built in about 9 months. New construction cost at about 3.8. Fixed equipment, we have far less of it in the building, so we think about $27,000 there. $125,000 for specialty equipment. General construction, about $800,000. Softs and all the other components that we talked earlier, about 1.3. And we think that this building is in the $6 million range, 5.8 to 6.4. Again, site acquisition not included, and a lot of that same.
is this in
dialogue.
a specific non-disclosed building, or is this just in general?
I don't understand. What do you mean by that?
Does this have the same status, the
Oh,
same
Yep.
design?
Yep. This, we'd assume, would be more nondescript. We'd assume that this building wants to be a bit more remote storage and not have the same kind of public awareness
Right.
to what its purpose is.
You know, the county took some older historic buildings and converted them, you know, the safety building and such. Now, we're looking at just new cost construction with this.
That's where we started here. So certainly would renovation be an option, depending on the building and, you know, its
Well, I'm
square
just-
footage and.
Just making sure that, you know, we look at everything, you know.
Yep.
I mean, if we're looking at new construction, then we
Yep.
need to study it as such, but
Yep.
if there's possibility to get another existing building that we could retrofit,
Yep.
I'd like to at least take a look
Understood.
at that.
Yep, understood. In fairness to the cost estimating effort, that number sways dramatically depending on the building and how much investment needs to go into that building. So it would really, that cost would really be dependent on the facility that's being studied. But
But
certainly,
you looked at new costs, period.
these are new, just to give you a scale of magnitude. Yep.
Okay.
And then, as we had noted, from a site consideration standpoint, the annex building noted, mainly here talking about the combined PD fire facility. We think that building is looking for a site of 5 to 6 acres. We put down 5 here. That again assumes a surface lot for parking. Okay, that assumes a, as I think we noted on here, a 73,000 square foot footprint. Okay, so again, if you think back to that 135,000 square feet, about 50% of that is really garage square footage. So a significant amount of that has to be on the first floor. And then there are other spaces, public spaces and kind of reception interaction spaces, some of our main response spaces that really want to be on the first floor. And then we could stack on top of that with a second floor. So this does assume about a 73,000 square foot footprint. A portion of that would be 2 stories. Okay. Public presence, whether that's downtown or near downtown, that's going to be subjective. It would be kind of site driven, but a sense of kind of civicness to that building we think is important. Proximity within the community, and then I think we do have to keep in mind response impact. Okay, I think this building, we are responding from it. We got to be cautious with some of our rivers and bridges and certain pockets in the community that might be challenging from a response standpoint. Again, we can't really comment on that in detail without, or at least until we start looking at specific sites. So with that said, in terms of next steps and questions, really, like we had said at the intro tonight, the hope was to give you a snapshot in terms of what we've learned to date, help you start to understand a little bit of the framework of what we're seeing as a recommendation, start to understand kind of general cost impacts. Again, all the caveats floating with the cost that it's still a working number. There's still a lot of information to get woven into that, but I think that range at least puts you in the right realm at this point. And then our next steps, as we had talked, would be engaging the full council, getting feedback to this same level of detail, and then obviously in closed session or in further dialogue, start to consider some sites and take a look at. Our responsibility is to help you understand what that footprint would look like on a site. And again, we want to do that with kind of the feedback from council as well.
Well, I'm in agreement with Alderman Duane and the mayor that we need to continue moving forward. We don't want to just stall on it, and no movement is I think really dropping the ball here.
And I agree with you that you put this on paper form for the council as soon as possible, so they get it, they can look at it, and if they have any questions during the council, they can ask them.
You can be available?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That'd be perfect.
You make that. You want to make that your motion? You
Yes.
have the documentation. So the motion on the floor would be to have the documents issued to the council as soon as possible, and then to have at council you would be available for any questions,
Absolutely.
and then to add closed session language to
Right.
discuss sites.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
And I'll second that. One question is,
Yep,
this
second for
depends
discussion.
on when the draft comes out, so this could be, what's the time frame roughly you're thinking? Could be,
This what we
Yeah,
just saw.
yeah,
So,
just-
absolutely.
what you
just what we
saw.
just saw, all right,
Yeah.
okay, that's fine, all right.
You want everything that you saw today in the packet to the other 8 council people tomorrow.
That would be
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, that'd be
You
useful.
can do that.
Yep, easy.
Is there any other discussion?
And just send them an email saying it's in there.
I absolutely will.
Is there any other commentary from anybody in the audience here that want to speak on this? Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Opposed? None. We'll move forward. Thank you. Sounds great.
Thank you all
sir.
very much.
That was great.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, we got several here, so.
We'll give just a minute here before we move on to the next item. So items 6 and 7, we're moved to take these together. I will read these. I'd like a moment just to speak and take discussion from the committee, and then we can take discussion from any other alders and staff, and then we can open the floor if there's any other interested parties. So item number 6 was consideration with possible action, the request from Alderman Moore to have staff present funding options for the construction of Colburn Pool at full bid to include excess stadium tax refund, additional bonding, and other sources, including potential stadium district grant, and a potential mix of all sources, include positives and negatives of each proposal. Item 7 was consideration with possible action on Colburn Pool bids and project budget, referred from the December 6, 2016 council meeting with the intent of finding a way to fund a 50-meter pool. So I've kind of put a couple things here together, and you know, one of the things that I didn't consider when I did this was the possibility of the stadium district offering some type of a grant before bonding, and I think Alderman Weary, you know that they've been kind of waiting on us to make a decision here before you could really present to them, but is that something you think you could get done before it comes to bonding, the bonding request is made?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the stadium district was intent on giving if there were events. So they wanted to give towards a scoreboard or something
okay.
that would assist in bringing in people. So that
okay, they did that for Ashwaubenon too, I believe, right? Okay. All right, so I didn't want this to go to a vote at council because we didn't have a funding mechanism in place. I didn't want to accept the bid when there were still some questions that we had out there. And the more I thought about this with the opportunity with the stadium excess, you know, I've gotten a lot of feedback now. Hardly any feedback in 5 years about Colburn Pool from my district until the discussion of using stadium tax money for items other than infrastructure started coming up. And now I'm actually really hearing from a lot of people, and I don't know if that's the same for everybody, but so my proposal here is that we bond the remaining dollars needed. And there's a couple of options or opportunities that we have here to reduce the bonding. The first, I spoke with Cheryl Renier-Wig earlier today, and they would be willing to put $25,000 in neighborhood enhancement funding toward the project. The neighborhood enhancement funds are paid by every citizen in the city. That was money that was bonded for. Fortunately for Alderman Weary, his district is not one that probably benefits from the neighborhood enhancement as much as others. I know 1070 Roscoe recently was awarded some funding for a New Homes in Your Neighborhood program, but compared to some of the downtown neighborhoods, Alderman Zima, Scanlon, myself, Menig, a lot of those neighborhood funds are spent in our districts, quite a bit more. And so with that discussion with Ms. Renier-Wig, she said that would be something that they would certainly be open to. Another part of that is there are committed budget dollars for Colburn Pool operation costs in 2017. I put $50,000 down on here, but the actual amount that's budgeted is $64,173. So if Colburn Pool is under construction and not being operated, those funds could easily be used toward like lead abatement or the asbestos abatement, and those dollars would not need to be bonded either. I sat down with Director Kramer this morning, and we talked, my proposal to her, and this would be something that the Parks Committee would have to review and possibly approve, is a 50-cent surcharge for non-residents, and 100% of the surcharge being applied toward the bond. Right now, there is a non-resident fee that is higher than the resident fee. Because we want to keep this a neighborhood pool and not a specific competition pool, because we don't want the City of Green Bay taxpayers subsidizing a project for Brown County, I think a 50-cent surcharge for non-residents is perfectly an acceptable thing. This would be Colburn Pool specific, so if people don't want to use it as a competition pool, there are 2 other pools in the city that they could go to, or water amenities that they could go to, and it may even help some of the population of those pools increase a little bit. The other, and I don't know if this is possible, but the last 2 items kind of go together. January 1st, prevailing wage is basically going to be terminated. There's no prevailing wage is going to apply anymore. Before we actually have a bonding amount in March, April, when those bonding proposals come forward, we need to know how the prevailing wage elimination is going to affect the bid that we have right now of the $5.8 million, plus the contingencies and such that we have to add. I did call down to Myron Construction today and spoke to didn't speak to the estimator, left a message for the person who did the bid to see how that would be affected. without knowing and not having an answer back and not knowing how that's going to affect it, it's hard for us to take action tonight. We can send a recommendation to council, but we will have to have that answer before at council we decide to accept or decline the bid. But regardless of that, I'd like to see us propose a incentive to the contractor to come in under the bid. My proposal there would be a 25% back to the contractor to come in. So for instance, they come in $50,000 under the bid amount, they would earn $12,500, 50% back, because all monies that are not spent will be applied back to the principal of the bond, reducing the amount of interest that's going to accrue over the next 20 years. And of course, that means that we would not have to tap into contingency, so that contingency money could also be applied toward it. It gives the incentive to the contractor that they're going to have cash on hand, and it gives incentive to the city that we're going to have long-term savings on the interest. Questions here, need to come with, Director Grenier, that can we do this first off? And if we can't do this, then we still have the opportunity to have this rebid after the 1st of January, include that language, and have these quotes come back. But my recommendation tonight would be that we send this to the council with the recommendation that we accept the bid with the remaining funding coming from bonding.
I'm going to
So we
second
have-
that for
For discussion.
So we got a second for
Well, I'll make
discussion.
that- yeah.
I just
Yes,
saw Director Berger out there. I don't know if you were shaking your head.
No, you cannot.
So I just needed to hear clarification on that.
Well, several things come to mind immediately. The 50% surcharge, at best, that would be recouping money. You still need to provide the funding up front. You're going to have to get that funding from someplace. This would replace that funding over a certain period of time. But if you award this bid, you're committing to the bid total.
Right.
Short of rebidding this project, the incentives for the contractor and the prevailing wages have no effect. It has to be as the contract was bid. It's a lump sum. I did get an email from Alderman Moore today, and he asked me about the effect of prevailing wage. It's an academic question. At this point, there's no way to know. What I can tell you is anecdotally, there have been 2 times in the time that I've been with the city where things like this have come up. I believe it was around 2009 or thereabouts, there was a reduction in the prevailing wage requirements. We saw no decrease in project funding. It simply didn't happen. The contractors put it in their pocket. In beginning of 2016, there was legislation passed whereby materials incorporated in public works construction were no longer subject to Wisconsin state sales tax. So theoretically, we should have seen a 5% reduction in material costs that were incorporated into projects. We've seen no measurable impact on construction costs. So if you're asking my opinion based on history, I don't think you're going to see much impact, if any, due to the reduction of prevailing wage. And there's no way to know that without rebidding the project. At this point, you have 2 options at your disposal. And I would caution anyone, especially anyone associated with the city, from reaching out to Myron Construction, because we have an open contract, or we have an open bid that we have not disposed of. Somebody could look at that as bid tampering. So I would exercise extreme caution reaching out to anybody at Myron Construction to talk about this project until we dispose of the existing bid. We've got a bid, and we only have 2 things we can do. We can accept the bid, and if we do that, we've obligated ourselves to the bid prices as they've been submitted, or we reject the bids. That's really all you have the choice to do right now.
So I think we need to send the recommendation to accept or deny the bid. That would not be a decision made by the Finance Committee. For us, we're trying to find a way to pay for the bid and then to let the council make that decision whether or not they're going to accept or deny. So if we make a motion on the floor here to agree to do bonding for the remainder, and that's the suggestion that we make, and we send it to the council, then it's still going to be the full council, then it has those 2 choices to make, to accept or deny.
Correct. The council only has 2 choices at this point. Accept or reject bids.
And what have we spent so far on we've spent some monies already on studies.
275.
275, 285.
I would recommend we send it to them just like this. That we can do.
To send,
Well, go ahead, Tom.
Well, the
Just eliminate
neighborhood
the,
enhancement funds, eliminate the parts you don't want to see, and just the 50-cent surcharge and up,
Above that.
go above that.
Director Kramer?
I would just like to mention something on that 50% or 50-cent surcharge. Right now, we do a resident, non-resident. I think this would make people go away from this pool. And our objective is to try to get people to come to this pool to recover some of this revenue. So I think all you're gonna do is send these non-residents over to Joanne's and Bresch. We're gonna lose attendance over at Coburn for non-resident people as a result of that. I think what you will make will probably be less than $1,000 a year on that. It isn't gonna be big money that you will make on this. You will make some money, obviously, but again, it will depend if those people decide to go to Coburn then or go elsewhere.
But if they go elsewhere, they're still paying the non-resident rate elsewhere.
Right, but that isn't going directly to Coburn, that's going directly to all.
What is the rate right now? For,
The charge is $275 for a child and $375 for a non-resident child. Adults are, for residents, $375 and $625 for a non-resident.
So is there a projection over the course of a swim season, if you will, what those monies would be? I mean, what have we had in the past?
In the past?
You know, just a ballpark.
Non-resident?
Yeah. What was our non-resident number at for admission?
For Coburn?
Yeah.
$1,400
So
currently.
That's not huge.
No. Okay.
Director Kramer,
Yeah.
can you confirm, is it $36.50 per hour, hour and a half that we charge for a pool rental at Coburn?
Rentals, yes.
We briefly talked about that this morning. I was just,
36.
36,
flat, 36.
is that per hour or hour, per hour?
But then we also have to charge for the cost of the lifeguards as well. If we have to bring lifeguards in to staff their program, then we also charge them. And that depends on how many lifeguards they need, how many people they're bringing, all of that.
Okay, and you're aware that the new Ashwaubenon pool charges over $90?
Right, they just put in new rates that they're proposing, and those rates were included at $80 an hour to $95 an hour to other things. They also have some specialties that they add with it that we don't have. You know, like they allow the premier building that's associated with. They can rent out the hallway, the center, as well as the pool. So they're
Okay.
packaged a little bit different than we are. But we're definitely low in rental fees. We are definitely looking at that as we speak. We are going to address that with the swim club. I know they're against raising any rental fees because they don't feel they have enough money to pay for that. But we need money for revenue to pay for this pool if you're going to decide to build a pool. So we're going to have to look at those type of revenues. Also, we looked at swim club swim meets and what those revenues were going to bring in. They're all over the map from what Ann had gathered from other communities of what they do and what they don't do. We can run our own swim meets, really. The Park and Rec, Ann's very qualified, she's certified and all that, so she can run those meets if we need to so that we could put some of that revenue back into this pool. However, that's not going to make the swim team real happy because then they're not going to have that revenue for the club. So we're going to have to decide which way we want to go with it, but we haven't had those discussions because we don't even know if we have a pool yet.
No.
So those were discussions we were going to have after that, and then we bring that information to the park committee for their decision.
Well, and we're only talking about a couple meets a year anyway. I mean, I guess, in my opinion on this whole thing, it's always been about a neighborhood pool, and it's always been about a neighborhood amenity. It hasn't, like I said, been about subsidizing the swim teams who are, you know, all over Brown County and subsidizing a product for all of Brown County to use here through the City of Green Bay taxpayers. You know, and if it's our amenity, and Alderman Weir, you might be able to speak a little bit more with your experiences in dealing with the swim teams, but quite honestly, if the economic impact, I think when you talk economic impact, you want to see such an impact that new businesses come in and open and hire new staff. And for a pool that's open 10 weeks, it maybe bring economic impact for those weekends, those couple of weekends where there's a swim meet. But it's not something that's going to create a bunch of jobs and create, new businesses and new tax base, and, So when it comes to the swim clubs, I don't even consider, I think anything that we get from the swim clubs as far as that swim meets is gravy, but of course we do want them to rent the pool and use the pool and practice in the pool. I don't know, I guess we try to come up with a creative way. I don't want to use any of the stadium tax excess. I don't want to pull any more of that away from Director Grenier, and that's been the big thing. That's been the thing I'm hearing most from my constituency. And as a representative, it's something I need to consider the most. I guess, is there further discussion from the committee in here? Now, Alderman Duane has suggested sending this with the recommendation to accept the bid. And, those last two items on there, the only way we could do anything with these last two items is if we denied the bid at council and then resubmitted it after the first of the year. Is that fair to say that?
We would have to rebid the project, yes.
Is there a cost to rebidding? Bid documents have already been prepared. We would just have to change some language and resubmit it?
We would have to get either you would have to contract with Grafe to modify the bid documents, or we're going to have to go in and get familiar with Grafe's bid documents to make the modifications ourselves.
I think if we delayed it 3 weeks, it wouldn't be so bad, but if it's going to take 3 more months, then it's something I wouldn't be interested in. Yes, Alderman Slide, sorry.
Yes, I have a question for Director Grenier. I think this, and I understand that the impact of the prevailing wage change on January 1st may be very small based on your history, but it also could be considerable. So I think we have to at least contemplate the potential of rejecting the existing bids and relaunching the bids in anticipation that prevailing wage changes would have a significant impact. As I contemplate that, who would be the best person to advise the council on that matter in terms of what the impact of the end of prevailing wage potentially might be?
I don't know. I don't know who I would recommend to you, because I think my staff is probably in the best position to understand historically what those impacts have been, and I've presented that case to you already. Honestly, I think if you talk to state legislators, they are going to overestimate the impact because this was their legislation.
Yes, I understand.
Although they did it several years ago, and from what we saw no impact. Again, until we do something with the existing bids we have, I believe reaching out to any of the contractors who bid on this project,
I understand,
would be fraught with some peril as well. So
who do you know in the construction industry that's not a member of these bidders who would have a knowledge base that could advise the council on this? Or do you not know anybody?
Offhand, I don't know that I have anyone who's big enough to recommend to you. We need a contractor who is substantial in size and does a large volume, dollar volume worth of business. We need somebody comparable to these folks, to the individuals who bid on the contract. And most of the folks that I have relationships with and would feel comfortable in providing those answers bid on this project.
So I think we'd have to look for a different resource. But the council ought to be advised by somebody in that business as to what they might anticipate gaining by rebidding.
Now, a couple of things that I do feel obligated to mention to you relative to a rebid situation. It is my professional opinion that the window of opportunity that we utilized to get the original bids was the prime window. We provided the bid documents to contractors early enough in the year that I do believe most of them don't have capacity taken up. We provided a sufficiently long window of opportunity for them to prepare their bids. I think we got the best bids that we're going to see, potentially excluding the impact of prevailing wage. I do believe that there is a possibility, and do I know it's going to happen? No, I don't. I think we need to be prepared that we may see higher bids come back because it may be viewed by some of the contractors as indecision on behalf of the council and shopping for bids. That's based on some conversations that I've had with contractors over the past year on situations where bids were put on the street and not awarded.
Thank you. I think we gotta find somebody to advise the council on this. And somebody from the construction industry.
Clarify a few numbers here, and that's regarding item 6, when I asked for different cost analysis here on what the effect would be here on bonding and borrowing the extra money. The annual cost to run Colburn Pool, including the $3.5 million that we've already committed to over 20 years, is $7,911,456. If we were to bond the additional $2.3 million in full, not taking out any of the other items we had, it would add a cost of approximately $3.3 million, bringing the total to $11,201,756. That breaks down to approximately $165,000 annually. That would be the cost to borrow the money needed to finish the pool, approximately. And that's the number that we're looking at reducing. Are there any other suggestions here from the committee? We do have a motion on the floor to send this to council to accept the bid. I wonder if we could delay that to January, maybe while we get a little bit more, we can get some more answers on here rather than bringing it to our next council meeting.
I'd feel comfortable, as Alderman Slotnick said, to have somebody advise us on this. I think that would be important. I think one thing to look at too is that we had talked about this pool having a shelf life of hopefully 50 years, maybe more. And we've had this pool in existence now for 50 years, and we've gotten as much use out of it as we can. So part of my thought on voting for something like this would be looking at the long-term efforts of this pool. So for 50 years, over time, looking at what that percentage or that amount would be per year over the term of the life of the pool. And I think, that would be nice to have that type of information as well. So.
Director Grenier, in the email that you sent to me, you had said delaying the bid wouldn't affect groundbreaking. Is that true? I mean, it wouldn't affect the timeline of getting into the ground or making our bonding request if we were to delay this to January?
I don't believe so, no.
And then Alderman Weary, I'd be curious, just you've taken the ball and ran with this one now for several years. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on this discussion and get your opinion.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the creative things that you've tried to work out and some of the leadership you've done there is much appreciated. I too would like to hear some of the prevailing wage ideas to see if that would save money or not. Of course, we are rolling the dice a little bit based on advice for rebidding it if it's going to actually go up and not go down.
Right.
Could be some bad situation to be in again. So we have some tough decisions. I'm wondering if perhaps I'll do some research too. Perhaps Director Grenier and yourself, Alderman Moore, to see if we can get these answers even by next week. It shouldn't be that hard to get. So hopefully we can just move this along to council, see if we can get these things answered by next week.
We can always delay it at council
or
table it for a month too. So
if there's a potential to save a sizable amount because of a change in the law, we should look at it. And if it doesn't delay things, we at least have to look at it.
Right. Yes, Alderman Steuer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. One thing that I had talked to Chris about as well was the fact that the Friends of Colburn raised over $1 million, basically $1 million. And we were looking at getting creative here with financing, and I asked him if there was a possibility to reach out to the community again and find out if there'd be another donor or two out there. But I think one of the problems is that people have committed money for naming rights, etc. And I'm just, like I said, just looking to see you know, you go to other communities and there are people that have stepped up, you know, privately, whether it's a pool or a entertainment venue, and they've done that, so. That's just one of my thoughts too, and I don't know if that's something we can further explore, or if you're, in your estimation, you feel that we've run that gamut with that.
I think that well's been tapped and there's not too much.
US swim grants, or Katie Ledecky or Michael Phelps want to write a check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, that's all.
I think we ought to send it on.
Well, we do have the
Yeah.
motion, which is on the floor, and the motion is to send to council our recommendation to accept the bid and using the funding mechanism of bonding.
Did you do it?
So that's the motion, and we have a second. All in
Yeah.
favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? None. All right, we're going to move this forward, and we'll see what happens at council with some further discussion, and I would just encourage, you know, all council members really reach out and try to get some answers, make sure you're comfortable when we make this vote. Thank you. Item number 8 is the report by the finance director.
I don't have too much to add. We're just working on, the finance department is just working on finalizing the tax roll. We're gonna start getting ready to have the tax dollars roll in, finalizing the budget. So just working on really those documents we're working on right now. As you know, the elections just finished their recount, so that was a busy time for them, so we have completed that. So that is my report.
I just got a question.
Yes, Alderman Dwayne?
Yeah, you just lost someone recently. You have that person? Is that what we?
Yep,
do we-
that position was on the personnel.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that's the person. That was my question.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, our front office
Yeah.
position that was on the personnel
Yeah.
agenda.
Okay. Accept the motion?
So moved. Receive and place in file.
Move and second to receive and place in file the report of the finance director. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Okay.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Motion second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Great.
Good job,
Good job, guys.
Hammer on stuff.
Yeah, I gotta get.
I got to go.
You get told you can't.